In today's video, we will be covering 3 of the most brutal methods of execution to ever be carried out. These punishments provide a glimpse into the depravity and disturbing creativeness of mankind throughout the ages. First up, execution by burning at the stake, also known as immolation, is a gruesome and barbaric method of capital punishment that has left an indelible mark on human history. This form of execution involves tying a person to a stake and setting them on fire. Throughout the centuries, it has been used as a means to enforce religious, political, and social conformity, often reserved for those accused of heresy, witchcraft, or other perceived transgressions. The practice of burning at the stake has a long and complex history, with roots stretching back to ancient civilizations. In ancient Rome, it was used as a method of execution for those found guilty of certain crimes, although it was not the primary method. However, the most significant emergence of this form of execution came during the Middle Ages. During the medieval period, the Roman Catholic Church played a prominent role in promoting the use of burning at the stake as a means of dealing with heretics. The Inquisition, established in the 13th century, aimed to combat heresy within the Christian community, and burning at the stake was a favored method of execution for those deemed heretical. One of the most famous cases of burning at the stake is that of Joan of Arc, a French heroine who was accused of heresy and witchcraft by the English during the 100 Years' War. She was famously burned at the stake in Rouen, France, in the year 1431. Decades later, Joan was posthumously exonerated and declared a martyr. In the 16th through 17th centuries, the witch hunts across Europe saw countless women and men accused of witchcraft and subsequently executed by immolation. These trials were characterized by hysteria, superstition, and mass executions, and they serve as a grim reminder of the consequences of religious and societal fears. The use of burning at the stake as a method of execution began to wane as society evolved and Enlightenment ideals spread. The 18th century marked a turning point as many countries began to adopt more humane forms of execution, such as hanging and the guillotine. Flaying, the act of removing a person's skin, is one of the most horrific and inhumane forms of punishment and torture in the annals of human history. This gruesome practice, utilized for various purposes such as punishment, intimidation, or ritualistic significance, has evolved over time. The origins of flaying can be traced back to ancient civilizations. In ancient Mesopotamia, the Code of Ur-Nammu, one of the oldest legal codes in history, prescribed flaying as a punishment for certain crimes. The act of flaying was also documented in ancient Egyptian art, indicating its existence in that society. These early instances suggest that flaying was used as a method of punishment and intimidation from a very early period. Flaying was employed as a brutal form of punishment. Those who committed serious crimes or were considered enemies of the state often faced this gruesome fate. It was intended to not only inflict physical pain, but also serve as a warning to others. Flaying also had ritualistic and symbolic significance in some cultures. For instance, in Aztec society, human sacrifices involved flaying victims to honor their gods. The history of this execution practice is a testament to the dark side of human history, where the barbarity of punishment and torture knew no bounds. Crucifixion, one of the most infamous methods of execution in human history, evokes images of suffering, agony, and religious symbolism. This brutal form of punishment has deep historical roots and has been employed by various civilizations for centuries. The origins of crucifixion are somewhat obscure, with evidence suggesting its existence in different forms in multiple ancient cultures. Some scholars believe that it may have originated in Persia or Assyria before spreading to other regions. Early references to crucifixion can be found in Assyrian and Babylonian texts, dating back to the first millennium BCE. However, it was the Roman Empire that is most famously associated with crucifixion. Crucifixion in the Roman Empire was a particularly cruel and gruesome form of execution. It was primarily reserved for slaves, foreigners, and the worst criminals. The victim would be nailed or tied to a wooden cross, left to hang in a public place, typically at a crossroads or near the city gates. This form of execution was used to deter rebellion, as a means of public humiliation, and as a form of capital punishment. One of the primary purposes of crucifixion was to deter others from committing crimes or rebelling against the state. The public and gruesome nature of the punishment was intended to send a strong message to potential wrongdoers. Crucifixion was designed to not only cause physical suffering, but also immense psychological anguish. Victims endured the agony of being displayed naked and vulnerable for all to see. In the Roman Empire, crucifixion was used as a means of asserting political control over conquered territories. It was a tool to suppress revolts and ensure submission to Roman authority. The most well-known crucifixion in history is that of Jesus of Nazareth. His crucifixion is a central event in Christianity and is commemorated every year on Good Friday. For Christians, it symbolizes the redemption and forgiveness of sins through his sacrifice. The Roman gladiator and former slave Spartacus led a famous slave revolt in the 1st century BCE. After his defeat, thousands of his followers were crucified along the Appian Way as a warning to potential rebels. The decline of crucifixion as a method of execution was gradual. With the spread of Christianity, the ethical and moral implications of crucifixion came under scrutiny. As the Christian faith grew in influence, many rulers in Christianized regions gradually abandoned crucifixion as a means of punishment.